Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're welcoming back Frank West, owner of the City of Games, the publisher behind the wildly popular game franchise, The Isle of Cats, which has raised over $2 million on Kickstarter in prior campaigns. Their current expansion, Don't Forget the Kittens, has a week left in his campaign and has already raised over $1.3 million. Frank, welcome back to the binge. How you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm great. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be back on the show and having a chance to chat with you.
Oh, it is awesome to have you back, man. Congrats. Congrats. Holy smokes. We're going to get into it because there is a lot to unpack with this campaign, like a lot. And I think when people understand how many people are working on this full time, and a little hint, not many, I think they're going to be blown away by the content that you've cranked out here in such a short time. For those who want to learn more about Frank's backstory, we're going to talk a little bit about it on this podcast, but if you want kind of the deep dive, I encourage you to go back to episode 69 of the podcast. That's when we talked to Frank last. Check it out on YouTube, or if you go to boardgamebinge.com, our website, scroll down to episode 69 and you're going to find it. All right, Frank, before we get into this kind of cat extravaganza, give us a quick overview of kind of who you are for people who don't know, kind of where your company came from, kind of what you did before you got into kind of the whole gaming industry.
Yeah, as you say, I'll do it kind of fairly brief because we went in a bit more detail last time. So I'm from the UK and I kind of started doing board game design about 5 or 6 years ago. My first Kickstarter was 4 years ago. The first game released 3 years ago, but it's really something that I've always been into games. You know, as a young kid, I played lots of different games, kind of more of the older classics, things like Cluedo, Monopoly, and then I got into Magic the Gathering, and then I got into a few more modern games, but lots and lots of video games, and I became a real hardcore kind of video gamer for many, many years. And then, to say, like, 10 years ago now or so, I just suddenly started transitioning into board games and playing modern board games more and more and more. And, like many people, got completely hooked on them and realized that all of that passion I had for designing and creating video games was something I could start looking at into the board game world. And say like 5-6 years ago, I kind of thought, this is it. I'm going to sit down and make that first big game. And it kind of went from there. And, it's been a crazy few years, to say the least.
Yeah, no kidding. So you've had, a few smaller games that you did before Isle of Cats. And you clearly hit your stride with the Isle of Cats campaign. It was hugely successful. I think in Canadian dollars, it was something close to like, I think it was $600,000. It had, I think, 8,000 plus backers. And, it's the game itself is a polyomino game. Can you explain kind of what that is for people that don't understand what that is?
Yeah, so this is kind of, polyominoes are basically shapes that are made up of multiple squares of the same size. So if you've got, a domino is 2 squares of the same size joined together. And as you kind of grow in the different shapes, you've got 3 or 4 squares like joined together, forming different shapes. And you might be familiar with games like Tetris that have these kind of pieces in them. And, in these games, generally you're placing these tiles onto boards, trying to achieve different things. In the Isle of Cats, you're trying to get certain colors or different cats together. You're trying to fill certain areas and trying to work towards completing different lessons, goals, objectives that you've kind of been set throughout the game.
Fair enough. And then when you did the Isle of Cats, and you can't see it, but the people at home are going to be able to see this. Can you just explain a little bit about this kind of story that you've created without even getting into kind of the mechanics of the game? Is the story itself of kind of the Isle of Cats, where'd that come from?
So all of my games are from the same universe, and my first game, The City of Kings, and it's funny because you mentioned a few minutes ago, kind of those smaller games that came before the Isle of Cats, and
still successful.
It's kind of like life is very strange with how it changes, right? Because if you go back to 2 years ago, I would have said The City of Kings was hugely successful, and it was, it had like tens of thousands of people like buy the game, and it did really, really well. And that was set in a fantasy world that I've kind of been building in my head for for much longer than I've been playing board games. And then my next game, Verdurant Gardens, was kind of set in that world. And I like the idea of all my games being set in the same universe. And, you know, some of them more linked than others. Like, you don't need to have played the other games. You don't need to be familiar with those other games. But if you are, you'll see crossovers. So, for example, in the new expansion that's just come out, the one on Kickstarter at the moment, there's the beasts. And actually, 5 of the beasts out of the 18 in the game are creatures that are from the City of Kings. So if you've played that first game, you'll be very familiar with these creatures. But equally, if you haven't, it doesn't matter, right? They're just going to be new creatures that you've not seen before. So for me, the story and the narrative is just continuing to look at different points in this world. And they aren't the same points in time. You know, there's a good 10, 15 years difference with these games. And some of the other games I'm working on are, you know, 1,000 years before and 1,000 years later. So it's just an interesting like universe for me to design within, I suppose.
Yeah, I do want to downplay your prior games. I mean, there's no doubt the amount of success you've had. I think for the Isle of Cats, for me at least, and I think people would probably echo this sentiment, is that it's become part of the lexicon of board gaming, right? Like people, I think, know Isle of Cats. I mean, we've got now Jamie Stegmaier doing reviews. So we got one of the world's top independent publishers doing a review on your game about how much he loves it, right?
It's just entered the top 100 on Board Game Geek, right? Yeah. So it puts it into a completely different level of game. There's very few games that get to that level of visibility and that many people playing it, that it makes it a really magical thing. And, you know, even before this new Kickstarter, I'm kind of like just blown away by how well it has done. You know, you always hope, but you never expect to kind of hit that kind of mark.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's humble of you, because I know when we talked last time, you mentioned that as well, that, you know, and I think most game designers, at least I think the ones that are self-aware, know that there's always that risk, right? They know that you're going to put it, you know, everything in the kitchen sink is going to go into developing this, and you're going to put all the pieces in play, right, on the board, so to speak, of how to do a proper Kickstarter campaign. And I mean, we're going to go through your campaign in a second. I mean, you're ticking the boxes. You've hit pretty much all of them. But there's still always that chance that it's just not going to resonate with people, right? And it's not necessarily the game or the story or the person. Could be timing. You know, it could be other world events. Could be other things that people are focusing on, the next shiny object that they're focusing on. So, but I think it is a testament to the amount of work you've put into this game to see the success that you've had with it, and see your success stepping kind of going up with each successive campaign, which I think is important. Did Isle of Cat, like this whole universe you created, did it start like with short stories for you at all? Like did you ever sit down and kind of map out, or did it kind of start with the game, the theme, and you're like, okay, how can I kind of expand this theme? Like how did that kind of work out?
I mean, the world as a whole just started as kind of, I used to, I mean, I don't really know when it started. I used to play around with so many like video game concepts where there just needed to be something. And when I started the City of Kings was when I really started thinking about bringing a lot of those pieces together. And obviously a lot of the stuff that was brought together based on the needs of the game. But like for the Isle of Cats, for example, it's funny because that really was a game that was designed where the theme and the mechanisms kind of came in harmony together. And it wasn't like 5 years ago I sat down and went, hey, there's going to be an island full of cats on this planet, you know, where all these people are from. But it does fit within that narrative within its own way. And it was something that kind of, you know, you could sit down and go, well, I want it to be out rescuing cats. You know, I could be having a crazy old person who's in a house who's got thousands of cats, and they're going to an adoption center, rescuing cats and bringing them back to their house. And mechanically, the game would be the same. But thematically, for me, that wasn't the story. I like being able to kind of not drill positivity into people, but to have it there in the background, you know. And if you strip off the layers of the Isle of Cats, the narrative is there's this big evil that's destroying the planet, and we're trying to save animals and save the world and look after and protect that planet from this evilness, right? And yeah, you can wrap that up and say, well, it's fantasy cats, like it's this evil villain and none of that's real, but there's an essence of things that are going on in the world, and just trying to set that nice positive message in the background without having to scream and shout about it. And to me, that's quite an important kind of nice touch that the game does.
That's fair and well put. So when I look at your current campaign, as I said, kind of in the intro, you've done $1.3 million, 8,836 backers is what it was at when I checked. I can see it's jumped up another 13 backers, I think, since I pulled the numbers like 10 minutes ago. What I found interesting, and again, I'm going to share the screen for people who are watching live so they can see the campaign page, because we're going to kind of get into the nuances of some of these things, and I find it interesting. I hope others do too. But let's start off at the very, very top. Is when I look at the people that pledged. So you had 2,000 backers in Isle of Cats base game last campaign, which had some expansions that were part of it. Coming into this campaign, when I was running the numbers, it looked like roughly almost 60%. I say about 62% of your backers are people that came over from the prior campaign.
Okay.
That I thought was very interesting because, I mean, that's a huge carryover. So that's more than half of the people that backed your game the first time around and said, you know what, I love this game enough. I want more. I want more, pieces to this world. I want to expand my playability. I just want more of the Isle of Cats. I thought that was telling. I also thought it was telling that on the flip side of that is you got 42% of your, it's like 40% of your backers are completely new. So people that got the base game, plus the additions and so forth. So coming into this, I guess kind of the first question is, with those numbers, was the plan in your mind always to try to bring new people into the universe? Or was the goal to really try to leverage the people that you already had that were obviously loyal followers? Like, which were those two were the kind of more important for you?
I think it's really interesting because a good starting point for me, I guess, is my approach to Kickstarter. I feel is very, very different to the vast majority of people's approaches. And I'm someone who truly believes in cultivating a community, working on this kind of concept of organic spreading. And I hate marketing. Like, there are so many things that I could do to my Kickstarter page that I know would encourage people to spend more money, would encourage people to buy extra stuff or more people to join. But for me, it's not about encouraging people to buy something they don't want. For me, it's about kind of just let's be upfront, let's be really honest, let's explain, let's make sure you're aware and let you make that decision. So to answer your kind of question about, was I looking for existing people or new people? For me, it wasn't really either. It was much more just, I want to find people who are interested in the game. And if that's people who already enjoy it, great. If that's people who know the game, but they've not had an opportunity to get it, fantastic. If it's people who aren't familiar with the game, great. But I really wanted to kind of appeal to all of them. And one of the things I've done, which, the vast majority of people won't be aware of, and again, I think this is where I probably differ quite a lot from people, is my Kickstarter page today is very, very different to the Kickstarter page on day one. And I change and update and modify the page throughout the campaign based on who's coming. So you can make an assumption in the first 24, 48 hours, the vast majority of people there are people who know about the game, who are aware of the game, who already own the game, are there for expansions. And as the days went on, I removed more and more of the focus on people who owned the game and started to replace it more and more with people who may not be so familiar, to try and appeal to people in different ways. So it's a completely organic, flowing, changing thing based on who's coming. I realize that's a big answer to a simple question.
No, it's a good answer. Do you map that out ahead of time? Like, are you mapping out, okay, week 1, this is what what I'm going to focus on. Week 2, this is how it's going to change. Week 3, it's going to change. Or is there some organic kind of flow to that? It's
definitely something that is pre-thought, but just like, I consider my Kickstarter page to be a board game, right? It's playtesting. As soon as you've got it live and you see people using it, you see the questions people have, you see problems people have, you see posts on Facebook, on Board Game Geek, on Reddit. And to me, it's about responding to each of those. If you see one person go to your comment section and say, I don't really understand how X works, then whatever, right? That person may have missed it. It doesn't matter. If you see 7 people in a day say this, then that's something you need to change. That's something you need to adjust. And every minute that you don't do that, you're potentially losing people or upsetting people or confusing people. So there's certainly a planned out schedule, but it's completely fluid based on what I see people doing and that kind of, the responses that you're getting to various stuff.
So talk to us about the expansion. So in this case, we've got Don't Forget the Kittens. It includes, I guess, 3 expansion models: your kittens, the beasts, the events, lesson modules. I think you get like a bonus boat pack. Can you kind of break down, because you've done a very good job of kind of compartmentalizing this on your page, but can you break down kind of how this is structured?
So the core of this Kickstarter is 2 new expansions. One of them is called Kittens and Beasts, and one of them is called Boat Pack. And those 2 expansions are what I see as the new content for the Art of Cats that I hope will get into retail next year and will become, the big retail releases. Now, the Kittens and Beasts expansion includes, as you said, kittens, includes beasts. It also includes events and other things, but I wanted the name to be Kittens and Beasts because it's just a nicer name for what I wanted to be. The Boat Pack is a pack of new boats. Now, because this is a Kickstarter, I didn't want to, it's important to me to build and design for the future, for retail and distribution and allowing people to be able to get this stuff moving forward. So the way I deal with that is I try to always have the core content as the price it's going to be, and then I layer on stuff that people can get as extras for free. So in this instance, the Kickstarter pack, or Kickstarter pack 2, as this is the second time I've done Yard of Cats, is a 3rd expansion which adds component upgrades but also new content, and everything was planned out before. None of this is like stretch goals or anything that's been unlocked. It was all there from the start, and that kind of combines to be a 3rd expansion that you get for free if you purchase the other 2 during the Kickstarter. And so for me, that's like the core offering. And then of course you can layer on, so you've got the upgraded box and the storage stuff, you've got the kind of the pins, the accessories, the base game and the original content if you don't have all of those things. But that would be that kind of core starting point.
Got it. And we got Julia Deere in the lobby saying that this is probably the most thorough, most well-organized Kickstarter that she's ever seen.
Cool, thank you.
The way it was organized is brilliant. Yeah, I like this kind of idea. I'm sharing the screen again, where you've kind of got like these yes/no answers, right? It's like this decision tree to kind of help guide you towards what it is you need to back, like which back level you're going to pick. Because the problem, some of the limitations with Kickstarter is obviously you kind of have one static page that everything gets dumped into. On the right, you've got your different kind of pledge levels, and it's not super user friendly, right? So what I think you've done here is you've done a great job, and quite frankly, beautifully illustrated in the graphic design. I think is awesome too, on how you kind of break that into this decision tree going down. Was that something that was kind of in your mind, almost helping you yourself kind of figure out how to map this out? And you thought, well,
it's a funny thing. Like, this is one of those things, right, where I was saying about people who want to try and force sales and get people to buy extras wouldn't do something like this, because this is aimed at informing the visitor so they can make an absolute decision. And that's like my heart, right? That's my core, is I want you to make that decision. So for me, this in an ideal world wouldn't be needed, but because of the way Kickstarter limits how you provide information, it becomes needed. In reality, you would want it to be a multi-page website, where you can click and go and see different stuff. We don't have that. So this campaign is incredibly complicated if you don't know what everything is, because there's like 12, 13 different items available on there, and each of those items are completely different things. There's different games, there's like upgrades, accessories, there's promos, there's storage solutions, there's the game, there's expansions, there's player expansions as well as normal kind of expansions. And all of this kind of means that you need to understand it. And as I say, normally, we've got 8 reward tiers on there. Normally you wouldn't have that many, but it's kind of a need, because I don't want to trick people into saying you're buying everything or nothing, right? I only want you to buy what you want to buy, because what on earth is the point in me filling your house with a load of stuff that's just going to upset you, annoy you, and you feel like you're being ripped off? Like, so putting those decisions in there. But when you go to a Kickstarter that has 8 rewards as opposed to 2 rewards, or 1 or 3, which is kind of my optimal, you kind of get stuck, right? Because you're like, well, there's so many choices, there's so many decisions, like I don't know, how do I discover this? And Kickstarter gives you just a list where you scroll through it and you can't really see 2 at once, and it's madness. So the flow chart was as much to solve that problem as it was to do anything else.
So why not do like 3 levels, for instance, like base game plus the new the kittens and the beasts, and then kind of the holy crap package, which is everything in the kitchen sink, and then have everything else as add-ons that they can kind of choose their own adventure type of a thing?
So I went down this concept of separating the rewards into 2 types. So you've got what I refer to as the veteran rewards and the new arrival rewards. And I felt like this was a really good way to cut 50% of those options off straight away. If you come to the page and you own the game, then you don't care about stuff that has the game. And if you don't own the game, then you probably don't care about stuff that doesn't have the game. So for me, that one decision kind of cuts it down from 8 to 4. And it does, obviously, you need to understand that that's what those 2 things are, which again is why the flowchart and so much of the page is pushing you at that. But again, what it does is it gives you choice and it gives you those options. And also the problem with add-ons is it's really hard for me to provide people with savings and discounts. And Kickstarter is about savings and discounts. And there are some items that I can discount, there's some that I can't, and there's some that if I combine them. So for example, we've got a big empty box, right?
The big box, the big 2-minute box.
Now, it's very easy to say, well, if people are going to buy this combination of items, they all fit inside that box. And therefore, when we ship it, we're not increasing the physical size of that shipping. And therefore, we can offer that at a discounted price. Whilst if people just say, I'm going to add this and I'm going to add that, you can't do those savings in the same way. So I allow people to make their own, and I'm very keen on people making their own, but that kind of counteracts the concept of being able to give them that saving, which is why I think that having strong, like, variable reward tiers is the optimal option for, again, providing that best result to kind of the person coming to the page.
For the big box, so let's talk about this 2-minute box. I have it on screen. I've had it on screen for a couple minutes here just for people to look at. It's pretty impressive. There's an amazing video you have on your page where you literally show the people, here's how I can cram all this stuff. And you got a table just loaded with kitten stuff. 2 minutes, bang, 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 everything's in the box, and it's organized in a way that you can easily pull it out, use only what you need, and so forth. So it's designed for how you would unpack a game when you play it, which I think is awesome. When you ship that, are you shipping that with the stuff in it, or are you shipping it empty and then they take their other boxes and they kind of make
so
their own configuration?
It's completely empty. We're not having like the games or expansions inside any of this stuff, so it will be separate boxes for as such.
So for shipping, because being a publisher myself, I know how costly shipping can be, especially when you start cubing out, and cubing out means basically the volume, for people listening, the volume size, so not just weight but actually the entire volume that you're shipping. That can actually override the per weight cost if it's large size boxes. How are you handling that for this campaign, where if you have somebody that's looking for kind of everything, this can get to be a pretty large shipping box per person, right, when it arrives?
So this is, again, by going back to those reward tiers, what it does is it allows me to have a preset group of items, and that preset group of items will be packed within their own boxes, but those boxes will be packed within the big box, if that makes sense. So whilst the individual components won't be kind of organized into it, like we'll still make sure that that box is filled, so the overall volume isn't increasing.
Got it. Okay.
But it is definitely an expensive project for shipping. And this is, one of the things I think that a lot of people probably don't realize is if you go for the all-in tier, the get the game, get all the expansions, get all of the pins and accessories and all of that, then it's well over 10 kilograms in weight. So you're talking what? It's around 25 pounds in kind of, US kind of weights and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's incredibly big and incredibly heavy. And obviously once you've punched it and everything, it gets lighter, but it's certainly a very expensive thing to ship. And with today's shipping climate, it took a lot of kind of getting that right and being sure that it's not going to be a problem in the long run.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I think that surprised me was even some of the price levels, right? So I think if I put it into Canadian dollars, you're up around $308 Canadian for the top tier, 179 British pounds. And people looking at that might say, wow, that seems like a lot. But then we look at obviously all the stuff. You're getting a lot of value for that, obviously. But as a kind of a sticker price for a game, I mean, you're on the higher end of that tier. And it almost seems that unapologetically so. For you, was it about kind of getting the right components and the right audience, quite frankly, for that? Because, this isn't like a discount item. It's not something you're just trying to stack them high, watch them fly. You're trying to get to a certain core of people. Can you talk to the pricing a little bit?
So the pricing is, to be honest, is really straightforward, and it works on the basis of, you've got the core price of the game, which is the core price of the game. The expansions are all priced to be what would be as individual items. It's not a big price. The big price point is if you come in and take everything. So you said it's like 300 Canadian dollars, right? So 300 Canadian dollars is obviously a lot of money. But if you kind of look at it from the other's perspective and say, within that, you're getting 2 games, you're getting 5 expansions, and then you're getting a number of accessories and merchandise items and other things on top of that, it suddenly becomes a very standard price. And this is, this is what I kind of went back on, was if you went to a deep discount website online and you bought all of the things once they've been released, what's that total price going to be compared to if you buy it through the Kickstarter?
Oh, it's probably gonna be the same.
And that's pretty much where I balanced it out. And it is funny because I sat down and thought, how do I feel about that total price point, right? And I kind of thought, if it was just one game with one expansion or something like that, I would probably feel pretty bad about it, to say the least. And one of the first things that I actually did was I went and looked at Scythe, believe it or not. You mentioned James Stegmaier earlier, and I went and looked at all of the stuff available for Scythe. So all of the expansions, all of the accessories, all of the extra bits, and obviously very different game to the Isle of Cats. But when I totaled all of that up at kind of the full MSRP, it came to about $650. And at that point, I kind of thought to myself, well, I'm at like less than half of that, right? And so is that amount for one game and expansions an obscene amount? No, it's not. It's not at that upper end. So then it came down to, is it worth the value, which I truly believe it is. And this is one of the big things for me, was each of these expansions was designed to be worth what that expansion is. Like, none of this is quick, like, hey, we're just going to try and make a few bucks. This is why I've waited 2 years since the last Kickstarter, because I wanted to watch, I wanted to study, I wanted to understand what people enjoyed, what people didn't like, where problems may be, all of these things, and then to use these expansions to enhance that. And then before this Kickstarter came out, I wrote a bunch of designer diaries to kind of talk through each of those decisions to explain the purpose of them. So for me, the individual prices for those components become justified. And at that point, it just comes down to, well, should someone spend that much on one game? And this is why there's 5 expansions, which are $25 each, rather than 2 expansions, which are $60 each, because this allows you to buy them piece by piece, and you can design and build that game how you want it. And it makes it more, entry friendly, and allows you to upgrade as you want to.
Fair enough. And I think if people are bought into the world, they're going to want all those pieces anyways. And it's no different than other games where people look at Catan, right? How many people have got 4 expansions of Catan on their shelf, and it's not cheap either, right? So if you find something you love, you're more than happy to get those expansions and so forth. Talk to us about this app. I found that very interesting as well. So you've got this app that you're giving away for, I guess, 12 months for free. on. What is this, and how did this all kind of come together?
So Sovereignty is, they're kind of like Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia or all of these other kind of, board game arena platforms. But the slight difference between them and these other platforms is they're trying to make it's more like a video game. Like, it's still a simulator of your board game, right? You're still a character around a table.
Yeah.
But you have characters, you have avatars. It feels much more like a Nintendo game where you're in this kind of 3D world and everything is automated. You're not trying to pick up a card and move it across the screen. Every point where you need something to do something, it does it for you. Scoring is done for you. In the Art of Cats, where you're placing tiles onto a grid, you've got buttons that allow you to move it one square to the right, allow you to rotate it, allow you to flip it. So it feels much more like a digital kind of designed experience, and it works perfectly on mobile phones, it works on tablets, it works on PCs. Next year we're hoping that it'll be coming out onto different games consoles as well, so you would be able to play it on a Nintendo Switch while someone else plays it on the phone. And for me, whilst it's a very new platform and therefore more risky than being on these more kind of known platforms, I feel like they are working towards the optimal experience for what a digital board game should be. It's not too far into the video game world, but it doesn't feel like it's hard work. It doesn't feel like a simulation. And to me, they've got that sweet spot, and I feel like it's a really good opportunity. And for them, obviously having the Art of Cats was a big kind of plus as well. So it's been really good working with them, and I'm really kind of excited to be able to give people the chance to play it and kind of get to see that platform and see the other stuff they're working on too.
That's cool. And then one thing I'll be remiss if I don't mention this as well is that you have another completely different game.
Yep.
in this Kickstarter campaign, you're Write and Play. Can you just give us a brief overview of what that's all about and how that's different?
Yeah. So the Art of Cats Explore and Draw is really funny because it's one of those things that it doesn't bother me, but it does bother me because you see loads of people these days saying every single game now has the roll and write, right? You see all of these people saying every single.
I think we lost your mic. Did you hit pause? There it is.
Every single game, you run a Kickstarter, you add a roll and write because of this and that, and blah blah blah. And for me, it really hurts because the story behind this, and I'll try and speed it up a bit, is when the Art of Cats released was literally the week that America, the UK, the world went into lockdown for COVID. Yeah. And it was a disaster for me, right? Because I'd spent a year planning for this big retail release, going to conventions, and it all fell through. And what I did was literally, as soon as that happened, rather than sitting down and saying, well, I'm screwed, like, what am I going to do? I'll have to wait to the end. I designed a completely new set of rules, which I released for free, that allowed people to play the Art of Cats game that they owned over the internet with other people. It allowed them to play over Zoom. It allowed them to play over Facebook. So it turned the physical game that had just released into a remote game.
That's cool.
And that game, then I started doing streams where people could play with me, and I would do it on stream, and I'd have hundreds of people coming and playing. And over those first few months, lots of other people started doing this, but I got it out so quickly that it became really, really popular. And we had thousands of people who would come and play this and would download it and use it to play during COVID. So Explore and Draw is a printable version of that rule set. It's literally me taking those rules that we made then and then turning it into something people can actually buy to have it as a nicer, more formatted process. So it was kind of the answer to COVID, and now it's become its own product just because there was enough people wanting that to come from it.
That's awesome. I do have one question in the lobby here as well. They're wondering when the digital game access begin. When does the access to the digital game happen?
So the access will be hopefully mid-July. So at the moment, the family version of the Art of Cats is done. The standard version is kind of like in late alpha, early beta testing. So I'm basically waiting for that to be completely signed off because I don't want lots of people to go there and realize that they can't quite play it yet. So as soon as the beta phase is over, so I'm hoping like mid to late July, and when the pledge manager goes out basically and people have given me their details.
Awesome. Where do you go from here? What's next? I mean, is it more cats or do you have another game on it? Like you're one guy, right? And like it is insane what you've cranked out here alone. It's an immense amount of work. So congrats on that. My hat off to you, that's for sure. What's next for you? Are you just going to take some time off and breathe, or you got something else coming?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? I do everything myself. There is no one who helps me with any of this stuff. Obviously, I have an artist who did some of the artwork, and that's about it. So the next steps now is obviously managing the manufacturing and production of this, and whilst that's happening, working on future games. I've got don't hate me for saying this, but I've got another small game which is it's an Ida Cats related game, but it's a completely different game, and I nearly had that on this Kickstarter as well. And I kind of felt like it's one step too far.
Too much cat.
I need to work out what I plan to do with that, because it's too small to do its own Kickstarter for. So that might be me looking at my first game that goes straight to retail, which is something I would really like to explore and try and see what happens with that. And then next year, hopefully, another bigger game. But it really is a dependency, because I try to only do like one game every like 12 to 18 months, because it's what my time allows me to kind of achieve and keep that good quality.
It's an insane amount of work, but it's a testament to what you do and how much you care about quality and your passion for the art. And I just want to congratulate you again on this campaign. I can't wait to see where it lands. I'm thinking you're going to be inching towards 2 million, but we'll see. And still a week to go, but we know no idea. We know the hockey stick in the last 2 days, so I'll be watching it. But Frank, I want to wish you all the best of this game, the fulfillment, and everything that's to come in the coming years. You take care.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.